In the months leading up to the election, Donald Trump and his campaign tried their very best to distance themselves from the 900-page conservative manifesto known as Project 2025, claiming that he knew nothing about it.
I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it.
This is a document I know nothing about. It's called Project 25. I heard about it a week ago and has nothing to do with me whatsoever.
I don't know what the hell it is. It's Project 25. He's involved in Project, and then they read some of the things, and they are extreme. I mean, they're seriously extreme. But I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it.
Well, most of us immediately called that out as BS, not just because Trump lies like he breathes, but because one of Project 2025's authors was caught on hidden camera saying that this was all part of the plan.
I expected to hear 10 more times from the rally, the president, distancing himself from the left's boogeyman of Project 2025.
Yeah. And you're not worried about that?
I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
He's running against a brand. He is not running against any people.
Okay.
He is not running against any institutions. It's interesting. He's, in fact, not even opposing himself to a particular policy.
Well, here we are, 2 weeks post-election. And what do you know? Turns out he was right. Trump is now choosing several people connected to Project 2025 for key roles in his new administration, including that guy that you just saw in that video there, Russ Vought, who Trump just moments ago announced as his pick to lead the Office of Management and Budget. As NBC News is reporting today, Trump's transition team is taking suggestions for potential hires from the extensive personnel database created by Project 2025. Joining me now is Angelo Carusone, President and CEO of Media Matters. Angelo, voila. It turns out the Trump administration is full of Project 2025 people. Tom Homan, his pick for border czar, was a contributor. John Ratcliffe, Trump's nominee for CIA director, contributor. Brendan Carr, Trump's pick to run the Federal Communications, contributor, wrote the chapter on the FCC. Pete Huckstra, his pick for ambassador to Canada, contributor. And Stephen Miller, his pick for deputy chief of staff for policy, contributor. And Russ Vought, of course, obviously. And then I will add the person who put together this personnel database that he's putting together, John McEntee, also tied to it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why it's important to note that their denials didn't hold up and that they're beginning to implement this is that it's so much bigger than that policy book. Project 2025 was really the professionalization of MAGA. And it was designed to sort of, squeeze as much juice out of the orange out of that first year, not just to implement their policies, but to literally shock the system so that they have smooth runway after that, to basically subdue all and eliminate all of the safeguards and norms that would typically prevent or slow down or be speed bumps in sort of undermining democracy or misusing the government or all sorts of other things. And so this latest example is, you had the policy book, which was all the ideas, the aspirations of Project 2025. So now we can use the validation that they're moving forward with it to figure out where they're going. And here's where they are. The other part of it was the personnel database. And it's not just the names that are going to be talked about in the news. It's going to be hundreds or thousands of individuals. And that was really always the tell, is that it didn't matter whether or not they disavowed Project 2025. The fact is, all the personnel that Trump could have hired were already part of that project. They had been pre-vetted. They had been determined where they'd be maximally slotted in. The personnel is policy, and those are going to be the people that implement it. And now tonight with the news about Russ Vought, it's worth noting that he wrote a piece of Project 2025 called The Playbook, which was designed to be kept private. It was the first 180 days look like. It's the compilation of all the executive orders, all the internal instructions for agencies, all the legal memos that are required to sort of legitimize or validate instructions. It is going to be the full-scale implementation of what everybody was talking about in the summer that they didn't want to happen, which was Project 2025.
Right. And I mean, and what it means, in a sense, is that Donald Trump has a plug-and-play presidency. Like, he doesn't have to do a whole lot. It's already all written out. He's going to have the people in place. He's going to move out the career people who would stand in the way of some of the things that are outright illegal or unconstitutional. He'll just have his loyalists after he does the step, which is to get rid of, they've said, 50,000 some odd career employees. And I just want to show you who they'd be replacing them with, who would be in charge of the list of who they'd be replacing them with. This is John McEntee, who some of you might have known from his frequent TikTok videos in which he mocks women who can no longer get abortions. He's the co-founder of the conservative dating app The Right Stuff. And he jokes about only men being able to vote. That guy is once again going to be in charge of personnel. And he wrote the list. He helped create the list, right, of the new employees.
That's right. I mean, he oversaw the database that the part that's really going to implement it. You know, when they replace all these individuals, or they restaff the government, or they staff the government like any new administration does, these individuals are not just sort of, you know, it's not just like a repository of resumes. They actually vetted them to make sure they never said anything opposed to Trump, that there was full loyalty. And when you think about why that matters, especially in what they're planning to do, I mean, one of the things that Russ Vought is advocating for is the elimination of all the post-Watergate norms in order to weaponize the DOJ. And he also is somebody that's advocating for deploying the military against U.S. citizens in order to quench dissent or protests. So when you have a guy like John McEntee and that database, part of the pre-vetting isn't just, oh, they check off all the boxes in terms of like their professional skills. It's also that, oh, they're sufficiently loyal that they will allow us to do all these things that otherwise would be illegal or not allowed to be done.
And the thing is, you can't say that enough. And I want you to say more about that, because you're talking about deploying the U.S. military. Remember, Mark Esper, who was Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense for a while, told him, no, you cannot shoot American citizens. You can't have the military shoot American citizens. He's going to replace people in the Department of Defense with people who will say you can, and that you can deploy the military against protesters, that you can arrest journalists for reporting things that Donald Trump doesn't like, that sort of thing, right?
That is exactly right. One of the things that Russ Vought did after he sort of left the administration in this sort of interregnum period that he's had, and has been referenced with that 180-day agenda, is that they have been building out the legal documentation, or what they consider to be the legal documentation, to justify internally the deployment of the military. I know it sounds hysterical. How can we possibly? This sounds so outrageous. No, this is part of the plan. Like that, they literally wrote a plan down and then prepared all the supporting documentation so they could check off that box. And then this is where the personnel police comes in. They're making sure they have the right people to implement it. Russ Vought gave a speech where he talked about the fact that he was planning on doing this, or at least to have the resources ready so that if there was sufficient blowback, they could deploy it. And I just want to put a bow on it to note that one of the through lines here is why they want to sort of, you know, it's not just revenge against their political opponents. That obviously gets a lot of fear. But the part that always stands out to me is that the rationale for why they need to do all these things is to end multiculturalism in America. That's not my term. Mm-hmm. That's what Russ Vought said. That the reason why you go after immigrants first, that you start to implement all of these big radical changes, is that this is the beginning of the end of multiculturalism in America.